Thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. We're very glad to have everyone. My name is Erica Perisman. I'm a senior advisor at Promote the Vote. Promote the Vote is a nonpartisan coalition organization, and our mission is to ensure secure and accessible elections for all Michigan citizens. And we decided to do this webinar because the canvassing and certification process is critically important, but honestly, it is somewhat obscure and often misunderstood. Many people don't even realize that this process exists. Many people think that the election results that are released on election night are official results, and that is not the case. Election results don't become official until many people in counties all over the state and at the state level do a whole lot of very detailed work to make those results official. So tonight we are bringing you a few of the hardworking people who do that work to explain what they do and how they do it, and to clarify what Canvas and certification is and what it isn't. So first, I'd like to introduce our panel and have them tell a bit about themselves. For example, how long they've been doing their current role and what they did before. So we'll start with Joe Roselle, who is the elections director in Oakland County. Joe, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Erica. Appreciate you having me here. I've served in the role as county election director in Oakland County since January of 2007. So time certainly has flown by, and I've learned to measure my career in presidential election cycles and how many I have left before I'm able to retire, et cetera. I've enjoyed this job in the near 20 years almost that I've been in it. Prior to that, I worked in local government in a city clerk's office, so I had some election experience before coming into my role at the county. I'm on my third county clerk. I've worked for 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. My role at the county is nonpartisan. And so that's a little bit about me and my role at the county.
Great. Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to Laurie Bruker, who is one of the Republican canvassers in Ottawa County. Go ahead, Laurie.
Well, thank you too for having me. I have been a county canvasser now for about 5 to 6 years. Prior to that, and that's in Ottawa County where I live now. Prior to that, I was elected Newaygo County Clerk for 20 years. So I have been doing election work for probably 27, 28 years.
Thank you. So you've been at this for quite a while.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you. And finally, we'll go to Dallas Dean, who is one of the Democratic canvassers in Newaygo County.
I've been on the board now for 21 years, and I've been chair of the board 8 years, and the vice chair for 11 years. So prior to that, I was on the Township Board of Review, so I had some involvement with local government, but I had a very good teacher to teach me how to do this, and that was Laurie.
Thanks, Dallas.
Great.
We did work very well together.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Well, as you can see, we have a lot of experience on our panel, and I think we have a lot of experience with our election officials in Michigan. We're very lucky to have that. So I am going to share some slides if I can manage to do that. And we're going to start by going over what we are going to cover tonight. We're going to go through what is a board of canvassers, how does a board of canvassers work, are the canvasses public, what happens at the board of canvassers, I'm sorry, what happens at the county level canvass, what are the actual steps of the county canvass, what does balancing precincts mean and how do they do it, because that's something that you'll hear about a lot. Tabulating write-in votes, because that's one of the things that the Board of County Canvassers does. The certification process, and then what happens if a county board of canvassers doesn't certify. A little bit about the Board of State Canvassers, although we're going to focus mainly on the county level canvass here. And then we'll save some time at the end for some questions, although we'll also do some questions as we go along. And we do have the chat feature enabled on this webinar. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them when we take breaks between sections and also at the end. So to start with, we're going to ask Joe to please talk about what is a board of county canvassers.
Okay, so a board of county canvassers exists in all 83 counties. So every county has one by law, and these 4 members of each county board are nominated by either the county political party or by the congressional district chairs if the county contains more than one congressional district. They're nominated by their political parties and then appointed by the county board of commissioners. And it's a 4-member bipartisan board. 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats serve on these staggered terms. And this is the board that ultimately makes the results official. So on election night, county clerks in these 83 counties are compiling results and putting those unofficial results on the website and making them available to the media and doing all of those things. But the results do not become official until that 4-member board of county canvassers has gone through a process of reviewing each precinct and then, canvassing, if you will, and then deeming those results to be official. They also have some other duties that like inspecting ballot containers every 4 years and doing a number of other acts, under this umbrella of the Board of Canvassers. But their primary function is really election certification. And they do really, in my experience, and really what's in the law, required to work in a bipartisan manner. And that means that at least 1 member of each political party has to vote in favor of a motion that's before the board. So the boards do a really good job, in my experience, of following the law, working through things in a very bipartisan manner. And it's very rare to find deadlocks or disagreements because it does require a member of each political party to concur with whatever motion is being made, whether it's at a canvass or a recount, et cetera. So aside from canvassing and ballot container inspections, the board also is involved in recounts. So they have that responsibility under their umbrella too. And their work is limited really to the 14 days after each election. So you have the election on Tuesday. Some boards choose to convene Wednesday. They have to convene no later than Thursday to begin that work. And then some counties finish after several days. Other counties do utilize all 14 days. It just depends on the complexity of the election, the size of a county, size of turnout, et cetera. number of factors that might play into how long it takes a county board to finish, but they do have to finish by law within that 14-day time frame. And are the canvases public? Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, please.
Yes, the canvases are public. And we've encouraged the public to attend. They can be present, they can observe the process, much like being present in a precinct on election day or in an AV counting board, you know, they can observe the process. However, unlike being a challenger, if you will, at a precinct or an AV board, there isn't a challenge process during the county canvass. I mean, it's purely the public is there to observe. Sometimes we have candidates come and observe. We've had races that have resulted in a tie or a 1-vote margin where candidates have wanted to attend the canvass to see how things looked in the precinct, to see if totals might change one way or another, to make a determination on whether they're going to file for a recount. So the canvass is a public process. It's designed to be transparent. We have noticed in recent years that a lot of different groups, candidates, the public have chose to exercise that right and come view the public canvass process, and we think it's great. And we would encourage them to do so. It's not a recount. It's not an audit. Those are distinctly different functions that are carried out either by the Board of Canvassers or by the county clerk or staff in the county clerk's office after the canvass is complete. So it's not a recount, it's not an audit, but it is a lot of other things to get those results certified.
And Joe, you can finish up with this slide, please.
Okay, so the canvassers do really have two primary duties, and that's to canvass the results in their county and determine the winner who is elected to the various offices within their county, or to transmit to the Board of State Canvassers the election results for their particular county for districts that are multi-county. So state Senate, state House, governor, US Senate, anything that is multi-county and circuit court, district court, certain judicial races, those results are transmitted to the State Board of Canvassers for ultimate certification by them. But the county certifies county offices and below the Board of County Canvassers, and then they work with their neighboring counties on things like school districts that cross multi-county, that cross into multiple counties. And so we work together on canvassing those school districts that cross county boundaries as well. So it's a process of canvassing and balancing and reconciliation and making sure that things are in agreement. And then once that process is done, they're actually signing that certification, and the certificates of election are issued, or the certificate of determination for, say, like a ballot proposal for a millage or bond, et cetera. And that's when it becomes official after that process.
Thank you. So what I think, I don't think we have any questions about that so far. And we're going to bring Laurie and Dallas in to talk about the steps of the real nitty-gritty steps of the county canvass. So take it away. I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. I meant Dallas and Laurie to talk about the steps of the county canvass.
Laurie, you want to do it?
It doesn't matter to me. Basically, the steps occur that very first day that we all resume and we all come to the county, the paperwork that it's involved is two parts. There is an envelope that has the county clerk. It's addressed to the county clerk and it has all the paperwork from the polls. It has the polling book, it has the tabulator tapes, and the statement of votes. All of that is in there. There is also another envelope that's been addressed to the probate judge, the Board of Canvassers. It's the Board of Canvassers envelope. That is kept separate until we meet. And then once we meet, we get all those envelopes to us. And counties probably do in a couple ways, but like Joe said, it's bipartisan. So in Ottawa County, where we have a lot of precincts, a Democrat canvasser and a Republican canvasser work together. And the other Democrat and Republican work together on different envelopes, different precincts. In smaller counties, all four of them may take part in the same precinct. So you do have those choices of the way that is. Dallas, you want
So
to
this
tell us
is-
what Newaygo
This is
does?
all the paperwork that basically has been filled out by the election inspectors on election night or during election day. So all of that is brought to the Board of Canvassers for you to review for every single precinct
That's
in
correct.
the county. Is that right?
Yes, that is
Right.
correct.
They have a checklist that they are to fill out and mark check when they do things. If they don't, they get to visit with us and explain why and correct those mistakes. And after you do it a few times, they suddenly get the hint that they got to do it. And that's the way it's done. So in the few times that we've had a recount, we've never had a problem because all the election workers are trained properly. So if they do
Okay,
it,
well,
we make sure that they check everything and they get to where those are very seldom are called in anymore.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide where we really go through step by step. So starting with the poll book.
Well, the poll book,
Okay,
you go ahead, Dallas, if you like.
go ahead.
The poll book has multiple
okay.
sections on it. And it has the oaths of the inspectors who started the day and who maybe come in through the day. So we have to check to make sure that all the workers have taken that oath of office. It also has a list of voters in it. And so we take a look at all of those voters. We compare the tabulator tape, which shows how many ballots went through the machines. We compare that to the voter names listed in the book, in the poll book, and they have to equal. We also have to take a look at how many absentees there were and how many spoils there were, because what we are doing is we are accounting for every ballot, whether it was used or unused, that was sent to the precinct. So we have, if the precinct says that there was 40 absentees, we have to find 40 absentee voters. If the statement of vote says that there is 10 spoiled ballots, we need to find 10 names in that poll book that has 10 spoiled ballots. And so what we are doing is verifying and balancing out the number of voters, the number of ballots that went through that machine, and where all those ballots were used to come up with a zero balance.
And occasionally, if they are out of balance and the election board couldn't figure it out, they send it to us and we spend an hour or two sometimes to figure out where they made a mistake. You're not allowed to be one vote off. You got to be actually right on every time. Well, by the way, one thing that was mentioned earlier, we're nominated by the political parties, but then elected by the county commission, not appointed. They actually do a secret vote on that.
Okay, we had a question that I'm gonna ask now before we go any further. Somebody asked, where are the staff who do the work from? Are they hired for the job like election inspectors, or are they regular county clerk staff?
County clerk staff.
That
County
would be
clerk staff?
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
deputized county clerk staff.
Yes,
Okay,
agree.
okay. All right, so you talked about the poll book and the remarks page that would document any discrepancies. Do you want to talk about the certificate of election now?
Sure. Dallas, you want to take that first?
Okay, the certificate of election, whenever there's election that we can decide at the county level, such as school boards within our county, where the majority of the schools in our county, or county commissioners, township officials. Once we certify the vote, we declare who wins.
There are specific certification forms that the board will compile in order to make those official, and we all have to sign them. Once they do that, then we distribute them to the appropriate places like the State Board of Canvassers or the local units of government.
Now, we have to sign 2 sets unless there's a millage question, and we have to sign 3 because one has to go to the treasurer's office.
Okay, I think we should talk a little bit more about the balancing issue, because this has become a source of a great deal of misinformation, I think. And Joe can certainly attest to that. He's been on the receiving end of a lot of discussion and misinformation. I mean, I think sometimes, you know, I know that you always try to balance all the precincts, but sometimes it's my understanding that it's just not possible to balance them sometimes. You know, you're just missing some information, even if you have the inspectors come in. You know, there are situations where it's not possible to balance the precincts because perhaps someone left with their ballot and no inspector saw that, and so that would not be documented in the poll book, or something happened with a ballot being spoiled, or a ballot getting, you know, going through a tabulator and getting ruined, and that somehow it wasn't documented in the poll book. Can you talk about that? Or Joe, do you want to talk about that, and what happens when you just can't balance the precinct? I know you have to report it to the, I think it's the Secretary of State in a report, but what happens then?
Well,
Sure. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
gonna
There
say-
are reasons that they're not a ballot. You mentioned one, that somebody took off, left the precinct with their ballot. They decided not to vote it, and nobody noticed it. Another time could be where 2 ballots stuck together. In
Right.
humidity, in August, sometimes we have trouble with that. And they need to put all those problems as remarks. They do their best on election night to balance that out and find out what the problem was, but sometimes they just can't. When it comes to us then, if we do our balancing and we do our canvas and we find that they're one off, either one over or one under, that the tapes don't match the list of voters, etc., we are required to have them come in to see us. And then most of the time they have to physically hand count the ballots. We don't touch the ballots. They hand count their ballots in front of us. And then once they do that. If it's possible to retabulate, we will do that. Sometimes there is just no answer.
And I think what Dallas said earlier in terms of, we don't allow them to be off by one or two, and the board goes through great lengths to try to bring every single precinct into balance. And sometimes it's very easy. It's having the applications to vote brought down and finding which voter has an application to vote, was issued a ballot, but maybe didn't get into the electronic poll book. So we're just accounting for that, or it's an absentee ballot that was returned, signed by the voter, tabulated, we have the envelope, but they didn't get a return date entered onto the poll list. So a lot of times with a little bit of effort, the boards can bring them into balance. We call it, election CSI, if you will, where they have to kind of dig in and find the missing app to vote, the missing AV envelope that wasn't given a return date. But absolutely, there are instances where voter tucks maybe they make a mistake on their ballot. They're embarrassed to ask for a new one. They tuck it in their jacket. They exit. Nobody sees that voter left with their ballot. The app to vote ends up on the spindle, and we don't know which voter left with their ballot. That's an instance where if there's no remark, like Lori mentioned, and a situation like that happened, we won't be able to bring that precinct into balance. It would be off by one because that voter's name is in the poll book because they got checked in, they went into the voting booth with a ballot, but they left with their ballot. It never went into the tabulator itself. So there's one more voter in the poll book than there are ballots that went through the tabulator. And so after taking a number of steps to try to figure out what happened, ultimately, if there's no remark, that's a precinct that would remain out of balance. We are required to report that to the state on an out of balance report. The county clerks are, after the canvass is complete, indicating how it arrived, what we did to try to resolve it, and then ultimately how it remained. In years past, that could impact future recountability, but with some new laws that are going into play, that wouldn't be so much an issue. But the boards take the balancing process very seriously, and we have spent days on a single precinct, pouring through applications to vote, AV envelopes, like Lori mentioned, having ballots physically counted, everything that we can do to try to bring all precincts into balance. But there are limited instances where something could happen that if there is no remark, that precinct just won't balance. It doesn't mean that there was anything nefarious or anything inappropriate or anything like that. It just means the inspectors didn't document something that they should have, that would have clearly told us why it was out of balance.
Along with that, we've had a few times where we would receive a poll book that was out of balance, but we'd also have an explanation, like a absentee ballot came in, it was quite tore up, so the proper rule is you photocopy it and run the photocopy through. And then they ran the original ballot through to see if it would have counted. And it did. But they realized immediately that the top ballot is not allowed. So they'd have to take it out, and we'd have to reduce whoever got those votes accordingly. In 2020, we took 4 votes away from Donald Trump. 2 years ago, we had a situation where a man voted twice. The Secretary of State's website was down when he came in to vote, and they allowed him to vote. And then when the website came back up, they realized he'd already voted by absentee. At first, not Lori, she wasn't county clerk at that time. The clerk said, well, the Secretary of State's website was down, and that was the reason. I said, no, this individual has voted twice. I don't know who the individual is. Yes, we had his name, but I didn't know the person. And I said, the proper thing here is we turn it over to the prosecuting attorney. And the board voted 4-0 to turn it over. The prosecutor then turned it over to the state police for inspection, for investigation. And the state police reported back that they contacted this 80-year-old man who was scared out of his wits, and the state police arrived because he had illegally voted. But it was just a matter, he had forgotten that he had voted. We had another circumstance where a man went in to vote and got told he couldn't vote because his name is already in the poll book as having voted. He said, "Did my son come in?" Because they have the same name. And it was, in fact, his son had stopped by and voted at 10 o'clock in the morning. When his father came in at 5 in the afternoon, he couldn't vote. Well, it turns out the son was actually a registered voter in Ottawa County. And to me, that one should have been sent to the prosecutor too. I lost that on a 3-1 vote with the board. But the fact is, they deprived a man of the right to vote, and his son could have voted twice. So I thought that today should have been that should have been checked out further. But once in a while, you can always have less voters, less votes than voters, because some people just don't vote in every race. So it's not unusual to see a declining number. It's when you have one more ballots than you have voters, you got to figure out where that other ballot came from.
Right. Well, I think the important thing here is that in the county canvas, as Joe said, there is a huge amount of time spent when these discrepancies show up. There's a huge amount of time spent trying to figure out what the issue is and to correct the imbalance if possible. And when I first started learning about how the county canvas works, I was kind of surprised to learn that the county canvassers have the authority. In fact, they're required to correct mathematical errors if they find them, which kind of seemed interesting to me that you do that. Does that happen often? Do you find mathematical errors in the totals that you have to correct?
Not often, but I've done that several times. I always write the correction in red ink and I initial it. But,
yeah, that's what it said in the manual that you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah, we only use red.
Yeah. Well, I mean, elections are run by humans and humans make mistakes. So it's not surprising really that should happen. But what I think is really great about this process is that we have everything that happens in the precinct, all of this paperwork that is prepared in the precinct. And of course, it's a long day in the precinct. These inspectors that work in the precincts, they start very early. Our polling places open at 7. The election inspectors have to get there well before that. It's a very long day. It doesn't end until the polling places close at 8 p.m. So they've already worked a very long day. Then these heroic people have to do all this paperwork to close the precincts. So the Board of Canvassers serves as a second set of eyes. It's an independent set of eyes. These folks have had nothing to do with actually administering the election, and it's a bipartisan independent set of eyes to correct any mistakes that might have happened. So I think it's a really, really good system that we have to find any errors and to correct them if they need to be corrected.
Erica,
yes.
Erica, another important piece in my mind is the fact that when we check all those numbers, we're actually checking the amount of votes that were given for or against candidates and proposals on the electronic summary that the county has received. When they put all of the numbers together, we're double checking that there was not a mistake in that equipment that added all those votes totals to people.
Yes. Yes. So it's really a very thorough process. I think we should be very proud of the process that we have and very appreciative of all of the people who do this work over a period of many days and many hours. So let's see.
I have a-
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have another
Did you have-
comment.
Yes,
I
please.
have another comment too. A lot of times, it used to be if the ballots were not balanced, and when they got through at the precinct level, they'd recount them. Now they're not allowed to do that. They have to bring them up to us to recount them. But it used to be, as Lori can remember, sometimes they would recount 3 or 4 times, and they wouldn't show up till 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning.
True.
And the clerk has to say the last ballot's in, and then she was supposed to be ready at 1 o'clock to go again. So that was a problem that by changing some of the rules, I think it makes it easier because they come in. We have special tabulators that go 3 times faster than the average one, and so they can tabulate those rather quickly. Because we had about 16% of our precincts out of balance at the end of the election night, but by the end of the next day, the day after, they were all balanced.
Yeah. Do you want to talk, Lori or Dallas, do you want to talk about tabulating the write-ins? That's another another function of the county canvassers.
That's a very
Well,
interesting.
actually, go ahead.
At the polling location, the inspectors are supposed to take and write in the back of the poll book, the write-ins. If a candidate filed the affidavit to have their write-in votes be counted, the inspectors are told to write each variation of the name separately. So Joe Roselle could be Joe Roselle or Jay Roselle, or they could spell Joe's name wrong. And the inspectors are told to write each variation down separately. And then it is our job to take all those variations and make a determination on if they all go to the same person or not. So we do spend a lot of time, actually, when we first get started, we spend a lot of time going through all of the write-ins to make a discernment on whether that votes for those votes count for that person.
Of course, you have to do that for every precinct.
Yes, in every office.
And every
But
office.
only those who have signed the affidavit. It used to be we had to count everybody, but now that they require an affidavit in advance, and we don't have to count Mickey Mouse and all the other ones that showed up.
That's right. We used to have to balance all those. We used to have to write everyone down and balance those as well. We did that for many years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, if we see 2 or 3 or 4 write-ins, but there were no affidavits filed, we just note that there were 4 write-ins, and that was it. No, we don't have to worry about them after that.
I think that's a good change in the law. Okay, now we're going to talk about certification. I've copied here the language from our Constitution and from state law. It's very similar, but not exact. Joe, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So the constitutional language and the statutory language basically make it clear that the Board of Canvassers' role is ministerial, somewhat clerical and non-discretionary. So a lot of what we talked about, either the precinct is in balance or it's not in balance, and how do we get it into balance if it's out of balance. And that determination can only be based on the statement of returns from the precinct or absentee counting boards. or any of the related, materials that are necessary to bring that precinct into balance. So it clarifies that the canvassers have a duty to perform this function, and it's limited to the materials that are presented to them as part of the canvass. So in other words, a candidate couldn't come into the canvassing board and say, well, there was a power outage at precinct 3 and the line was particularly long, and so I don't think the board should certify this election because the power was out for half an hour and voters had to wait a little bit longer to cast their ballots, so you shouldn't certify this. That's not under the constitutional language and the statutory language. That's outside the scope of the canvass. It's very clear that while under public comment, someone could come to a canvassing board and make a statement like that about a long line or a power outage or something of that nature, the board's role is limited to the materials that are presented to them, and then having that duty to perform that certification. Canvassers also are required by law, like a lot of public officials, to take an oath of office. And so they take an oath of office to support the United States Constitution and the Constitution of this state, and perform the duties of the office of county canvasser. So they have that oath along with the constitutional and statutory restrictions, guidance, law, etc., that really kind of clearly outlines what their role is. Before this existed, it was kind of always assumed that, but this kind of just codified really how boards were operating in the 83 counties.
Okay, thank you. So then certification itself is really just filling out the paperwork, honestly. It's completing the county canvasser's report, recording the votes that are cast for each candidate and for or against each ballot proposal. And then that's, declaring the winning candidates and the outcome of each of those ballot questions for the offices and ballot questions for which the board is responsible for determining the result. And then I think we said this at the beginning, the county canvasser's report includes a certificate of determination, which the canvassers sign, and that is certifying the election. So that is the final document, which gets sent on. And I think Joe, you'll want to talk about this a little bit. What happens if a county board doesn't certify? This is the big question.
Yeah. So there could be a couple circumstances where a county board doesn't certify. Sometimes it could be that there were a large number of precincts out of balance, maybe some type of technological issue with an electronic poll book or something that just caused an inordinate amount of work in the canvas, where the board is butting up against that 14-day deadline. And so if the county cannot complete the canvas within the 14 days, state law requires that the board notify the Secretary of State first that they're not going to meet the 14-day deadline. And then it's at county expense. Board members can be required to personally deliver the canvassing materials to Lansing, to the Board of State Canvassers, to have it completed, or there's been instances where the state has actually sent personnel to a county to complete it on site with the assistance of county staff. And so it's rare that this occurs, but sometimes 14 days in a large county like Wayne, Oakland, they may butt up against that deadline. I know in Wayne County, for example, when they had the mayoral write-in for the city of Detroit, where the entire race was going to be write-in, and there were just thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of write-in votes, they butted up against that 14-day deadline because of the number of precincts involved and the amount of work. So the state did come in to assist in the completion of that canvas. There could be an instance where it's not because of an inordinate amount of work, but maybe a board just decides they're not going to certify a particular election. I mean, if that occurs, the canvassers could be found to be in breach of their oath under state law, could be guilty of a misdemeanor for failure to perform their duties, and likely would be, subject to litigation. And in our county, as with probably most, if you're failing to perform a duty or in breach of your oath, you're not indemnified by the county, which means you could be held personally liable and not represented by the county's attorneys, and any settlement would have to be paid personally, not by the county. So the law has really changed to, sort of place this emphasis on, getting it complete, and to prevent someone from just saying, well, I'm not going to certify, despite, maybe all the I's being dotted and the T's being crossed, I'm not going to certify. It would then go to the state board, but there could be ramifications. So it would ultimately get completed by the state, but there could be ramifications to the county board in litigation, and then expense to the county because the state doesn't complete the process for free. They do send a bill, and the county's obligated by law to pay. So fortunately, this is a very rare, in my experience, in near 20 years, this is a very rare thing that's happened. I can recall one time, maybe Lori remembers, the very first time the electronic poll book on election day was rolled out statewide in an August primary. She's smiling. I think she remembers. And there was this proceed button that locked the voter in. And what a lot of our local clerks found at about noon was no voters were in the electronic poll book. We had apps to vote for everybody, but they weren't in the poll book because the proceed button was not locking that voter in. So during the county canvass, a lot of those poll books had to be recreated off of those applications to vote. That caused us to butt up against that 14-day deadline. So it wasn't an intentional act. It wasn't anything. It was just the circumstance of this brand new technology being rolled out. But as we move down the road, if there was a board that were to just say, we're not going to perform this duty, the law does prescribe specific steps on what would happen. And that is the state board stepping in, and then potential litigation.
Yeah, I just like to, oh, go ahead.
There's one other circumstance that we went into, and that's on school elections with your outlying parts of school districts that are in other counties. We have to wait till that county is finished. I happen to be a good friend with one of the counties next to us, to their clerk, and I've asked her to help us to get that done. But we have another county that absolutely demands they go by alphabetical order. And the two townships that we deal with, one starts with S, one starts with a T. And sometimes we're there till 4:45, 10:05 on the last day to try to get that. And in one case, we actually certified with the what was reported as a vote. It was 2 for and 2 against, but we had to wait till the end of the day to record that. We finally just used the unofficial results because we couldn't get the results from the county that had certified it.
I'd just like to add that that language about ministerial duty of the Board of Canvassers that's now in the state constitution and in the statute, that is actually in case law in Michigan stretching back to, I think, the 1800s. It's not new. It wasn't in the Constitution and it wasn't in the statute, but it's been the law in Michigan for a very, very long time. So, you know, it was just a matter of putting it into the Constitution and putting it into the statute so that everybody was very clear on the duties. I think everybody understands it now. Okay, I think, oh, the Board of State Canvassers, right. In most cases, the Board of County Canvassers is going to transmit its determinations to the Board of State Canvassers, which looks very much like each Board of County Canvassers. It also is bipartisan. It has 2 Republican members and 2 Democratic members, and it has the same ministerial, clerical, and non-discretionary duty to certify the election results as the boards of county canvassers. In this case, however, its obligation is based solely on the certified statements of votes that it gets from the counties. And that obligation is also in the state constitution and in the statute. So that is also very clear. And then once the election results are certified by the Board of State Canvassers, then the results are fully official, and then recounts can be requested by candidates and by ballot question committees. And then eventually the audits that are conducted by the state can happen. Then it's all wrapped up and tied with a bow. So that is our process. And I don't know if we have any questions in the chat, but we can, if anyone has any questions, we have a few more minutes, so please, please feel free to put your questions in the chat now. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Joe and Lori and Dallas for being here tonight, but also for all the work that they do all year round, for all the years that they've been doing it for our state. They are really, in my view, heroes for the work that they do. They and their counterparts in other counties. Very lucky to have them.
Thanks, Erica. And I do want to say, having been around the state and around the country, really talking to colleagues everywhere, I really do feel like we have a great system here, and that really voters can have confidence in our system and all that goes into the logic and accuracy testing and all of the proofing of ballots and everything that goes into sort of the beginning of the process. And then you've got the Board of Canvassers, that independent body doing the certification, followed by the post-election audit, where we do the county does a manual hand count of a random race after. I mean, there's so many checks and balances that are built into our system here. This is a critical check and balance, but one of many that I think can give our voters a lot of confidence that their vote counted and that the results are accurate and secure.
Absolutely. We had one question. Do these boards also handle recounts?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And whether it's a recount of a county level or whether it's a recount at the state level that the state then asks the county to conduct, either way, the county board of canvassers is involved in all recounts.
So the first thing they have to do is look at the paperwork and check the seals. If the seal number is wrong, it can't be recounted. Luckily, we've never encountered that in Nueco County, but I know several years ago there was a state house race in counties along the border of the west side of Michigan, and there were several precincts that could not be recounted because they hadn't properly sealed. So that county clerk got called in for you got to get at it to train these people better than that. And the board of canvassers, if you weren't following the procedure either. So it's very important that we follow the rules as written. Use the checklist on every precinct.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a security measure.
But it's an embarrassment to the board and the county clerk to be told you can't recount because somebody made a mistake. Because you should have
Right.
caught that mistake.
I think in the new law that was passed and that will go into effect next year, there is an exception that if an election official saw a seal being broken, like for example, when a ballot container is being loaded onto a vehicle and the seal is broken, then and they actually see it, that they can execute an affidavit and say, I saw it being broken and it was, I was there and that's why it broke. I think there's an exception for that, I think.
Yeah. But you see on their paperwork quite often, they'll have a seal number crossed out because for some reason they had to unseal it after they sealed it and then they put a new seal on it. But that's the proper way of doing it at the Board of Elections.
Right. Okay, well, I think there are no further questions. So we will wrap this up. Thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for attending. And we did record this, so it will be available to folks who were unable to attend. And thank you again to our panelists.
You're very welcome. Thank you too.
Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.